But this is a thing I really want to spend some time on. And so we talked about before with the Eagles and Nick Foles. And what did you say about Nick Foles?
I said that Nick Foles was a little bit more seasoned.
No, about being, is he a career backup?
Yes.
Nick Foles is a career backup.
I don't think he tried out his thing in starting, and it didn't really work
in Philly
out
and in St. Louis
too well for him. But I think he's somebody that people would pick if they had to choose between him and Case Keenum before the season started for sure.
Okay, now this is something I want to get into with Foles versus Keenum.
Yeah.
Now we all know how good Nick Foles played in that 2013 season. He came in for an injured Michael Vick halfway through the year and threw 7 touchdowns against a very bad Oakland Raider team, and he kind of took off from that season. Do you want to know Nick Foles' stat line? Because him and Case Keenum started 10 games in these seasons. Now, Case Keenum obviously has a little bit more games to play in, but through the 10 games, do you want to know Case's stat line?
Go ahead.
He's had 67% completion percentage, 2,700 yards, 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 7.5 yards per attempt, 245.7 yards a game, a quarterback rating of 98.6 average, and has only been sacked 9 times. So that's pretty good.
Yes.
Obviously.
Pretty good.
That's really good. And the 9 sacks has been something that was really good. And the 5 interceptions have been something for Case Keenum that have really kind of been a highlight, I guess. The low interceptions have been something that's really out of Case Keenum's character. With how well the Lions played, he could play a lot more calm. He could be a lot more calm. But I think when we look at Nick Foles, his stat line, Nick Foles' stat line in the 2013 season. Now keep in mind, they played around the same amount of games. They both started 10 games. Nick Foles, 64% completion percentage, 2,891 yards, 27 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, 9 yards per attempt, 222 yards a game, a quarterback rating of 119.2, but was sacked 28 times. So their stat lines are oddly similar. And what I'm saying here is Case Keenum having that one Nick Foles season where they play over their heads for a very long period of time, and then they're going to revert back to themselves eventually. And so we look at Nick Foles. He threw 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Now he didn't play the whole season, but still 27 touchdowns isn't bad. He threw in 8 games because he got injured the second half of the next season. He threw 13 touchdowns and 10 interceptions from only throwing 2 the year before. He reverted back to being a backup. And I think for and I'm not knocking Case Keenum. He has played very well. But again, when you want to look and you have people who say we need to lock Case Keenum up to be a starter, we need to pay him a 5-year deal worth $50 million or 50 plus. No. Get off the Case Keenum bandwagon, because as you can see, when Case Keenum had pressure in his face, he just panicked, and that's something Case Keenum hasn't had to deal with yet. And this is something that really, I think that we see Case Keenum, we see why he's not the long-term starter, and you see why Mike Zimmer has not named him the starter yet. And the national media just keeps pounding and pounding Case Keenum. But you look right here, he's exactly like Nick Foles was. Nick Foles reverted back to being a backup. And not that Case Keenum can't lead us to a deep playoff run, but Case Keenum is not the future quarterback of the Vikings. And that's why Mike Zimmer has been reluctant to name the starter. That's why Case Keenum's always been on a short leash, because we need to see what Teddy has. Not that he's the long-term answer, but we need to see if he is, because he shows more promise than Keenum. But again, back to this whole Case Keenum, Nick Foles bit, is these stat lines are oddly similar, and now Nick Foles ended up being a backup again. His starting stint was very, very brief, and I believe he was relieved by Case Keenum. So for all you people out there who want to just give Case Keenum the starting role because he's played well in a 10-game stretch, please just take off your quarterback beer goggles. As some people would say, we're Vikings fans. We haven't dealt with a lot of great quarterback play. But, I mean, we can't just get too excited about this, because we have to really look and see what our future plans are at quarterback. And again, not that I've been very critical of Case Keenum, and he has proved me wrong here and there. But for people who think Case Keenum needs to be the long-term answer, you got to look at his stats and look at Nick Foles and look and see that they're on the exact same path. And I'm kind of beating this to death, but I think what we need to realize is that Case Keenum is playing over his head right now, and he's had perfect situations. He's only been sacked 9 times this season in 10 games. He's averaging less than getting sacked once per game. And he's had great wide receivers in Thielen and Diggs, and a great tight end in Kyle Rudolph. And for the most part, besides last game, great offensive line play, a good running game with Dalvin Cook, and then when Dalvin Cook went down, Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon have stepped up to be good running backs, and a great offensive play caller in Pat Shurmur, who will end up being a head coach in 2 months. He's had perfect situations around him, but when all of a sudden the offensive line crumbles, you see he's reverted back to being a career backup.